Hello everyone, I am here today with Ben Casnocha. Ben is an old friend online and co-author with LinkedIn founder and chairman Reid Hoffman of The Startup of You, which is the #1 New York Times best-selling book. And he's also a co-author of the forthcoming book Tours of Duty, the new employer-employee compact. He founded Comcade, a leading e-government software company at age 14, and wrote a book about his experience titled My Startup Life. Ben, nice of you to be here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Carlos.
Absolutely. The reason this was so interesting and so exciting for me is because the Startup of You, the book that you wrote with Reid, is I believe a core philosophy that people should pay attention to in their professional careers nowadays, and it's one of the books we discussed the most in Exosphere. So I thought it would be interesting for you to start telling the people about it a little bit and what drove you to write that book.
Sure. The book came out in February 2012, so it's been out a couple years. Let's see. The origin of the book was that I have been a technology entrepreneur my whole life, and for most of my life thought that an entrepreneur was someone who lived in Silicon Valley and started an internet company. Because that's where I was from, that's all I knew, and that's kind of what the accepted definition was. When I was 18 years old, I did an exchange program in Zurich, Switzerland, which was my first time traveling outside of the US. And that got me hooked on travel and exploring other cultures. And a couple years after that, I embarked on an around the world journey, staying with different readers of my blog. This was a little bit before I think we met in Buenos Aires. That was a different trip. But I spent about 5 months traveling through Europe and Asia and some Latin America, actually, meeting with lots of local professionals and people who felt like they knew me pretty well, but I didn't know them. But as I met these folks, a lot of them reminded me of the very best entrepreneurs I'd met in Silicon Valley, even though they weren't starting a technology company. And so there was a guy who, the blog reader in Shanghai was a band instrument musician on a late night television show. And yet he was thinking about his life and approaching his work in a very entrepreneurial fashion. He was taking risks. He was building his network. He was being flexible yet also persistent. He was thinking in a sophisticated way about his competitive advantage as a professional. And so that got me thinking maybe entrepreneurship is more of a life idea than a business one. Maybe the skills of entrepreneurship and the skills that tech entrepreneurs employ when building companies, maybe those skills can be profitably applied by a broad number of people in a broad range of industries. And so I came back to the States after the trip and was kind of noodling on this idea. And I mentioned it to Reid one morning over breakfast. And he kind of laughed at me and said, well, Ben, that's why I started LinkedIn, which is to be the technology platform on which every individual professional can take control of their career and manage their career capital as if they were an entrepreneur running the business of themselves. And so we had a very aligned vision and passion for the idea. We had arrived at it from dramatically different points. Me through my own entrepreneurial journey and then around the world travels, and he through building this massive professional network on the web that gave him a glimpse at how hundreds of millions of professionals around the world think about their career and manage themselves. So we teamed up to write the book, and we thought that it was an important time to do it now because the world of work is changing. A lot of the old models for how you think about yourself and think about your career are outdated. And so we felt like there's an opportunity to deliver a framework that would equip professionals to thrive in the modern world, this global world, this competitive world, world where industries are changing, and give people the toolkit they need to adapt themselves as the world changes, just as entrepreneurs adapt their companies as competition changes and the world changes.
Right. See yourself as a startup, right, and behave that way. Do you find that the idea, because as you said, there was some people that you always felt had that mindset already, even before the book before the book came out. But now that the book became so popular, and there's this network of students and so many, the book's been translated to so many languages. Do you find that the idea is kind of taking place in people's minds either because of the book or just because of some sort of normal response to the environmental changes? Do you see people behaving more like a startup nowadays?
I think so. I mean, it's anecdotal more than systematic or scientific. I mean, I think people are, in some sense, forced to change, and if they don't, then they're not really thriving in their career. So I'd argue anyone who has a job, especially in an economy like the U.S., which is really bifurcating into big winners, big losers, not as much of a middle class in terms of career. I think the folks that are in the category of big winners are having to think this way. And maybe they read Startup, maybe they read something else or come to a solution set on their own. But I'd argue it's impossible to survive and thrive as a professional today without thinking strategically about your career, without thinking about your network, without thinking about your professional identity, without thinking about risk taking. And so, yeah, I see people thriving all around me, and they're thinking this way. And I think the good news is whether it's Startup Review or any other framework that is in this category of thinking, all of that is superior, I'd argue, to the old model of thinking about this, which is best encapsulated by the book "What Color Is Your Parachute,"
right,
which in the U.S. continues to sell 100,000 copies a year. It is by far the most popular career Bible, probably worldwide. And What Color Is Your Parachute has a set of ideas that I think actually have very little relevance to the modern world. And yet lots of people continue to read that book and try to operate their life in that way. And whether it's now or in the future, I think it will be shown that they're not the ones who are getting ahead.
Right. It's what it used to be, maybe more of a choice. Now it's more of a condition. Right? It used to be, well, maybe I can be an entrepreneur, or maybe I just go on the corporate ladder. Now, if you ignore becoming like an entrepreneur, maybe you just suffer the consequences. It's not so much of a right.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of we live in a market-based world, and the market decides who wins and who loses, and it's indifferent about who the person is. It is what it is. Those who win win. Those who lose lose.
Yeah. So what about the new book, the Tours of Duty? What is this new employer-employee contract that you're talking about?
Yeah, so and the book is actually going to be titled "The Alliance:
Ah, okay,
Managing Talent in the Network Age." No, the HBR article was titled that, so that was been the temporary title, but it's going to be called "The Alliance." It comes out on July 8th, and the Alliance, in some sense, is a natural outgrowth of the Startup Review, because one of the things we heard from employers and companies was, how do I manage employees who are thinking this way, right? So you show up to work and you say, I want to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan Z. I want to be building my network. I want to be taking risks. As a manager, how do you think about that kind of employee? Now, you probably want that kind of employee because that's the kind of person that will be thinking the big creative ideas that you need for your company to be innovative. But what is the relationship you forge with that person? How do you empower them to invest in themselves while also investing in the company? And so what we discovered as we dug into this was that most companies, the framework they have for thinking about the employer-employee relationship is one of two things. So one way they do it, one way most companies think about their employees is that their employees are like family. So you hear CEOs say, we're a big family, and you're here for life, and you get a job, we offer you lifelong employment, we train you, we take care of you, we'll comfort you when you're down, and so on. And the problem with that model is it's not really economically viable in a changing world. When the economy is changing, you need your company to adapt. You need people who have the latest and greatest skills. You need people who are willing to be adaptive. And so if you have this kind of lifelong employment promise, you're not going to have those sorts of people. So what we've seen over the last decade is companies shift from the family model to something on the other extreme, which is treating their employees like free agents, where and Jack Welch famously said in the 90s, at GE, we have one-day contracts. So you can imagine every day being forced to prove yourself, your worth to your company. And if the moment you are no longer relevant, we'll just fire you, right? And that's how a lot of companies operate. They really minimize the employer-employee relationship and just hire and fire at will whenever it's convenient. And both of those models have advantages and disadvantages. The family model certainly allows a relationship to flourish and loyalty to thrive, but doesn't actually lead to adaptiveness and innovation. And the one-day contract model has the advantage of being more cost-effective. Like it's cheaper for companies just to fire people whenever it's convenient, but it also doesn't lead to innovation because these kind of entrepreneurial startup employees want to have a relationship with their manager. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. And so with the alliance, we carve out a middle path in which companies can treat their employees as allies, characterized and mutually invest in each other for mutual benefit. And the company can commit to the employee that their career will be transformed, even if they pursue that career at other companies in the future. And they'll allow that employees to build their network and stay adaptive, just as the Startup of You suggests. But at the same time, the employee will commit to the company, to invest in the company, to make sure that he is around to complete a tour of duty, to hit a key revenue objective, to ship a product over a specific period of time, say 3 to 5 years, a realistic amount of time for an entrepreneurial employee, right, who's never going to spend their whole life at a company.
Right.
So anyway, that's the new book, and we've been thinking about it for 2 years. It's a short book, but we think it can be a big idea in talent management and HR, especially for larger organizations that want to have Startup of You employees but don't have a framework for managing them.
Right. You know what's interesting to me about your blog and your the books you write and everything is that you seem to touch on many different things, but I'm sure you find a connection between all of them. You touch on entrepreneurship, you touch on the corporate career, you touch on education a lot. A lot of things that you wrote this essay with a read about disrupting the diploma. What is it that drives all these things, man? How is it that all these things are connected for you? That make it seem like it fits.
Well, I think everything I do, or not everything, I try to structure a life that allows me as much as possible. You never get 100% to just simply pursue my curiosities wherever they lead me. So, if I'm interested in the criminal justice system, I'll just start reading about the criminal justice system and maybe write a blog post about it. And I like being able to do that as I get interested in things.
Right.
I think the thing that I've realized is, and someone told me this a while ago, I can't remember who, but you can imagine like there's a big house and the house is built with bricks, and there are bricks that construct the house, and then there's cement in between the bricks. And one of the things I realized is that I like being kind of the cement that holds together ideas and keeps the house together, as opposed to being a brick that's like, I'm fully deep and all in on one big idea. I prefer to kind of be medium deep on an idea and medium deep on another idea, and then be able to see the connection.
Right.
And so it's interesting to me, like take the new book. I just did this blog post last night about employee tenure at companies.
Yeah.
Is it shrinking? Is it growing in terms of how many years an employee spends at a company? And it's interesting for me to think about that data and that trend around employee tenure and link it to ideas around trust and loyalty in the workplace, or link it to the Startup of You entrepreneurial thesis and try to find the connections. To me, that's more interesting than like spending months and months and months digging into that one topic. And we need people to do that role for those people in society, but there also can be a role for people who can make the connections and then those ideas.
Right. Do you it reminds me, there was an old post from you about exposing yourself to randomness. It's one of those posts that really got a hold of me because of where I was living. In Buenos Aires, I kind of had this need to be exposed to more randomness, but I didn't live in Silicon Valley. I didn't live in a place that had a lot. I think I kind of get into the whole entrepreneurship, social media, whatever, a bit too early for that environment. So
you had randomness in your romantic life, but maybe not in your professional life.
I didn't think that was going to go here, but yeah, exactly. So the point, it's good that you remember some of the anecdotes that we talked about when you were in Buenos Aires. So the point is that I remember when we met in San Francisco. I remember we had this conversation about how when you're, sort of, I need something else, but I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. we would talk about this, tuning up or tuning down serendipity or randomness in your life, depending on what it is you want to do. So if you're in a situation where you would like to focus and you dig very deep on one topic, like you were saying, you need to sort of block out a little bit of the randomness so you can actually get to work. But if you're more in this situation where you like to keep exploring, or you're not, or maybe either you have a lot of interest and you always want to keep pursue a lot of interest, or maybe you don't know what you want to do, so you want to get as much input as possible, then you expose yourself to a lot of randomness. So are you right? What is your situation right now? Are you sort of exposing or shielding yourself from randomness in your day-to-day life?
Well, I think you summed it up very well in terms of the overall idea, and I think one of the reasons I'm doing this chat with you, Carlos, is because I'm actually tuning up on the randomness right now. So this is an example of a thing that I do. I mean, I would do it anyway because we know each other, but and you would ask me to, and I'm happy to help out on anything you're working on. But just in general, I tend to do like fewer, like this to me is a very random thing. Like,
right.
It's an interview, will show up somewhere. Maybe people will find it useful or interesting, maybe not. Who knows? It's not really connected to anything that I'm currently super active on, whatever.
Right.
But who knows what might lead from it. And in the next few months, with the new book coming out and so on, I'm obviously going to be more inclined to try to promote my ideas and things, because that's what you do when a book comes out. Whereas, while writing the Startup Review, for example, I spent 2 years highly focused.
Right.
So I definitely think there's a spigot, and right now I'm starting to turn the spigot more into randomness, in part because I've had a kind of an extended bout of focus.
Right. So it's sort of an anti-fragile approach, right? A lot of stress or a lot of intensity on one thing, and then a lot of low stress, so you can kind of recover. So maybe you've been from this stage where you've been doing a lot of focus work. Now you go into a place where let's let it breathe a little bit, and let's see what new things come in. I do hope that just because of Exosphere, there's more randomness for you to return to Chile.
Of course,
that's where we are now.
I can't wait to visit.
Yeah,
I've been meaning to come back. So
exactly, and I do want to touch on the topic of travel. You've traveled so much, so a couple of questions that I have, and I think they're touch on the same topic. When we met, you were sort of doing this travel around, like trying to figure out what were some places in Latin America that were worth paying attention to. I know you've done a lot of that in Asia as well, Europe. Right now, from where from what you can see from where you are, what are the places that you're thinking? Anyone that's into into entrepreneurship, and B, into get into more successful corporate career. What were some places or cities that you think are worth paying attention to? And then also, second part of the question would be, what are your thoughts on this idea that everyone's kind of trying to replicate Silicon Valley, or try to create these new hubs of entrepreneurship around the world?
Well, I think let me start with the second question, because the first question is harder. So I think the second question, I think it's ultimately a good thing. We're experiencing a renaissance in entrepreneurship. There are organizations like Endeavor and Kiva and others that are doing incredible work, spreading the word of entrepreneurship and empowering folks to realize that they can start a business and take control of their lives. I think that's fantastic. So there are all sorts of ecosystems sprouting up all over the world, in Santiago and Buenos Aires and Silicon Valley and Istanbul, Turkey. I mean, it's truly a global phenomenon. And every ecosystem is different. Every place is different. And so I think you always want to try to learn from what other people are doing. So I think it makes sense for folks to try to learn from Silicon Valley. That's fine. But also figure out what's unique about your place and build an ecosystem and market the ecosystem, leveraging those unique characteristics. So, I remember in Chile, I don't know if people still talk about this, but there's always this idea of, you can test the product here because it's like this affluent, connected, educated population, and it's like a concentrated population. So do the beta test here before you take it to the rest of the world, kind of thing. I may be misrepresenting that, but that's an interesting pitch, right? I don't know how true it is, but it's a good. If you go to a Microsoft and you say, why should you set up a campus in Chile? That's a compelling argument. Like, hey, we have this population that's unique. in Latin America in terms of affluence and developed nature.
Right.
So every ecosystem should have that, right? And so
a focus on their strengths and instead of a replication, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and like one of the funny things in a lot of poorer countries, like they default to like we're going to be the offshore call center place for American companies, and it's like nope, that's already been claimed by about 15 other countries.
Right.
So try to be creative about what the angle is going to be, because density is what really creates the entrepreneurial magic. Like if you have an entrepreneurial ecosystem and you have 15 different companies all doing completely different things, it's not as powerful as if you have like hey, we're all about outdoor kind of food, or we're biotech, or we're whatever, or we're the place where we do a lot of consumer internet applications that can go global. WhatsApp was like bigger in Chile before it was bigger in Western Europe. Like I don't, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think on the first question, there's lots of opportunity around the world, and the challenge is there are the obvious things to say. So I don't know if I have anything that's non-obvious. I mean, some of my favorite places in the world to visit are not necessarily places I would like say that's where the opportunity is. I mean, the truth is, opportunity always is the real great opportunities are places where other people think there is no opportunity, but you see opportunity, right? It's just like. And the goal, we say this in Startup Review, but when you think about risk, the really great risks to take are the risks that other people think are really risky, but you found a way to manage the risk in a certain way. Right. So if it's like, hey, go to Shanghai and start doing business in China, okay, a lot of people think that. So what is your differentiated perspective for that to be the case?
Well, when people don't know a problem very well, they define it in those sort of broad terms, and it's the people that actually understand it very well that can see the gaps and where the opportunities, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like I'm fascinated by Japan. I love Japan. It's a super developed country, but a lot of people are down on Japan right now, right? It's a lethargic workforce, no immigration, no diversity of ideas. Like obsessed with territorial sea rights vis-a-vis China, like a whole bunch of things. And yet it's really an awesome place to spend time. And it's a highly technologically advanced culture in terms of how they think about mobile technology. So I would love to do something in Japan at some point. And I'd suggest others take a look, right? And maybe you would say the same about Argentina, right? Like the country gets shat on in the press and things are falling apart and like the currency is a disaster, all those things. But maybe that means there's opportunity that others don't see, right? And so that's kind of the general frame I would look at. So yeah, like China, India, even the US, there are lots of opportunities in all the obvious places, but find the places that are less obvious.
Got it. It makes a lot of sense. But it does remind me of, and I'll read this excerpt on one of your posts, when you're talking about how this idea of entrepreneurship around the world is hot, it's popular right now. And it's particular among the youth. And I agree with that. I see it in Argentina. I see it in Latin America in general. A lot of young people are thinking of entrepreneurship as a career path. And you say in the past few years, the body of knowledge about how to start a company, how to code and work with technology, how to thrive as a business person in general has gotten extremely well organized, and of course is freely accessible to all. And you also talk about the curation of the content. And this is what we're seeing in the world. The reason I think a lot of this has exploded is also because the ideas and the methodologies and the tactics of how to do entrepreneurship is really available. So it's not just for the entrepreneur, but also for those cities, places, environments, whatever, that want to promote the entrepreneurship internally. But then my question would be, if it's all there, let's put it that way, why is it that most startups still fail? Where is it that the real it's not really about information or knowledge, right?
Yeah, well, certainly there's a knowing doing gap where people know the things but don't do the things they know they ought to do.
Right.
I actually have a post I want to do on this, which is like the number one thing people talk and don't do is dieting. Number two, this is in my own life. Number two is they say they want to travel but never do.
Right.
And the third is they say they want to meditate but never do.
I was going to say, I wonder if it was on your list. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just hear people talk all the time about all three things. They read diety books, or they read meditation books, or they talk to travel agents, but never actually do any of the three things. So it was certainly a similar dynamic for entrepreneurship, where you read it but don't actually do, and behavior change is extraordinarily hard, and it's a whole separate topic. I do think there are some people where you some people either lack the cognitive ability or the proper kind of instruction for taking general advice and applying it to an individual circumstance. So I saw this a lot with my friend Ramit Sethi's blog, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where he would do a post on personal finance saying like, hey, if you have $25,000 in savings, you should put $20,000 into an IRA, invest $5,000 in an index fund. And someone would leave a comment and say, I have $27,000 in savings. What should I do? And the answer is like, okay, well, take the general framework of 25,000 and stretch it a little bit for your extra 2,000. But you don't have a fundamentally different problem.
Right.
You just need to take the general advice and slightly customize it.
Right.
And people have a very hard time doing that. It's like so there's a lot of articles, because obviously if you're starting a company, you have your own set of specific circumstances and challenges. So you go online, you read books, or like you have a career issue, you read the Startup Review.
Right.
Well, my career is slightly different than the example story they had in the book, so it's not relevant to me.
Right.
And so there is this interesting thing that people have a hard time. Obviously, there are sophisticated people who know it but just don't act. And then there are people who access the information but decide it's not relevant to them because they can't apply a general theory to a specific circumstance. And then there are people, a lot of whom in the more developing part of the world, who actually still can't access the information. And there still is a lot of work to do, going village by village, so to speak,
right,
and helping them understand that they can empower themselves and start a business, and here are like the basic tips to do so.
Right.
So that's kind of like the three categories, I'd say, of how I view it.
Before I get into another thing, as a personal heuristic, and this is from experience, when I meet someone, the more they read, learn, listen, absorb about what entrepreneurship is, the worse entrepreneurs they are, because they're so rigid with their formulas. They believe, that the world should function in that particular way, and the moment things deviate from the norm, the moment you need to deal with uncertainty, with risks, with lack of information, with lack of resources, that's when things get hard, because that's what the models don't really talk about. The models don't really get into the gray areas. That's what they're models, and you shouldn't use them as rigid laws, but more as rules of thumb. You talked about in your blog recently, in a couple of articles, is about this idea of happiness versus meaning, and you basically that it's hard for an idea to provide both things. Either in general, you either get the short-term happiness, or you get a more long-term meaning, and it's hard to reconcile both things. So if it's something you have to pick right now, what is it that you're picking? How do you see it in your personal life?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. So yeah, you've summarized it well, which is it's unusual for a career path to offer both happiness and meaning. Happiness meaning the day-to-day pleasures of relaxation and low stress and luxury accommodations and plenty of money and lots of free time to explore. It's rare for a career opportunity to offer that and to offer the kind of deep meaning that emerges when you do work that involves sacrifice, that involves striving towards a big goal, that involves a lot of commitment and lots of time and sweat. And
entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship is kind of
entrepreneurship, I'd say. Most entrepreneurs I know are not happy day to day. Now, there are a lot of kind of more lifestyle entrepreneurs who actually are pretty happy. That's why I'm a huge fan of people that kind of run these, like, I'm a one-person business. Right. But if you're kind of doing the classic, I'm starting a business, trying to hire employees and scale this entity,
right,
day to day, it's really fucking stressful, and you're not actually that happy most days. But when you go to bed at night, you kind of have this more intangible sense of satisfaction that you're building an institution, you're building a legacy, that your sacrifice is worth it because of the goal that you're striving for.
Right.
And that kind of emotional satisfaction is a huge rush for entrepreneurs.
Right.
So for me, the last couple years, I've been doing a lot of stuff kind of behind the scenes with Reed and others, and it's probably optimized a little bit more on happiness than meaning, only because I have been really behind the scenes. So most of the stuff I've done over the last 2 years, I'm not in the headlines for. I'm not. It's not about me and my goals. It's about other organizations and other people. But my day to day has been fun. It's been interesting. I've been working hard, but also, have had a stable life and kind of steady income and so on and so forth. And so I probably optimized for happiness. Prior to this most recent job I've had, for example, writing the startup review, day to day, that was not a very fun process, right? You have this empty Word document and you try to fill it up with hundreds of thousands of words.
Right.
That's really hard. And you put out a book and then someone emails you and says, this is a piece of shit, or someone on Amazon says, there's nothing new here. I've read all this before.
Right.
Those sorts of things while you're writing the book and then right when it comes out aren't actually that fun and make you happy. But when I look back over the last several years of my life and I think about all the sacrifice I made and all the hard work to produce this book that I'm really proud of, I feel good about myself. I feel like it was something important to do. And then if I get hit by a bus this afternoon and my life ends, something will survive me and be a testament to my work.
Right.
So I'm probably in a happiness mode, but I'm actually thinking about shifting to a more meaning mode. And I think, as I wrote in the post, my general advice, I think, is to pick meaning, but be really conscious of how you can layer on top of that various happiness hacks and happiness habits.
Right.
That kind of will enhance your day-to-day livelihood,
right.
even if your general path is one that involves sacrifice and meaning.
Right. So sprinkle some routines that can help you focus on the present, enjoyable present, and every now and then as you work on something meaningful in the long term. That makes a lot of sense. I do have now. I'll ask you two more short questions about this because you touch on interesting. One is that your friend Chris Ye, who I think he's going to be co-author of this new book.
Yep.
He replied to your post and he was saying that this idea of happiness versus meaning is more of a problem for the ambitious like you. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I think the more ambitious you view yourself and the higher expectations you have for your life, the more it's a higher bar to have something that actually is meaningful, right? Because obviously, the person who's working at a checkout stand at a supermarket is almost certainly that's not a meaningful activity for that person. Right. Like they are enduring an extreme amount of tedium that neither you nor I could ever really imagine. But like go up a few ranks in kind of the career totem pole, and you have someone who's we'll pick our favorite, a junior social media manager at a big airline or something. Pick some big company, and you kind of go to work, and you're managing the Twitter account, and you're all over it, and you're making sure the tweets go out on time. If it's
U.S. Airways, I think you're having some fun.
You're having lots of fun. You're scouring the web for images. You're sharing the best images on the web with your customers. You may actually at the end of that day feel like you have a meaningful life, right? And that's great. Like that's awesome. Yeah. But I think if you see yourself as really ambitious, if you're like, I want to be president of the country, I want to be something like that, you're not going to be really satisfied being a junior social media marketing manager. And so, I think if you're more ambitious, you strive to do work that's more meaningful. But those kinds of jobs tend to require the sacrifice that hinders happiness.
Right. The moment a good friend of mine, Sebastian Marshall, he wrote this post a long time ago about how when he was comparing himself to his contemporaries, he was like, oh, I'm doing okay, I'm pretty successful. So then he kind of switched and said, what if I compare myself to the greatest in history? And he immediately went from the top 1% to the bottom 1%, and that was terrible for his mood for days or weeks, whatever. So it is sort of relative. And let me ask you this last, sort of question. because you just said, when you've been an entrepreneur since you were 12, 14, something like that, and kind of calling your own shots, or be doing what you thought you wanted to, you had to do most of your life, until you kind of get into this working relationship with Reed, and then like you said, you're kind of maybe more behind the scenes, and even though you're in the cover of the book and everything, that maybe it's not as, so much about what it used to be. So how was that transition from being the star of your own show, to working and collaborating with someone like Reed, with his experience and doing something, with Startup View and in LinkedIn, which is, this behemoth of online?
Yeah, I think it's certainly different. What I've realized is that, I mean, I'm kind of eating my own dog food, or dining in my own restaurant, I guess is the new phrase I've heard, because eating dog food actually doesn't make any sense as an expression. Right. One of the great number of English expressions that make no sense but involve animals in some way, in a weird kind of way, like multiple ways to skin a cat and beating a dead horse.
What the hell?
But I actually, taking the Startup You advice, I think I can be rather entrepreneurial even in the context of a job.
Right.
And my job is unique and very different from like a classic. I'm not even on the payroll. I mean, well, right. I won't get into it in this call, but I'll be writing up a summary of all the things I've learned and done the last couple of years. But suffice to say, yeah, even in a more structured job, I think I can be entrepreneurial. And right. It's putting to the test the Startup of You thesis, which is that you can indeed be entrepreneurial even if you work at someone else's company. Right. But I think it's also been a humbling experience for me. It's shown that it's highly unlikely in my life that I'll ever be as influential or as successful as Reed. He has 20 years on me, but even still, just statistically speaking, it's just extremely unlikely that over the next 60, 70 years, I will achieve that level of influence or success or fame or however you want to measure it. And so it's been interesting to kind of think about that and understand how I can help someone else, and not just think about me, but pursue ideas and a mission and causes that are really important for the world, and to not be front and center, but to just be a good foot soldier and helping make those ideas reality. Right. And I've kind of enjoyed it in a sense. I've enjoyed it very much for a whole bunch of reasons, but it has been a different kind of experience, but one that has been in its own way quite satisfying.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me right now. As Exosphere has grown a little bit, and I mean, when you start as a little team and it's 2 or 3 people, you're used to doing everything, and lately it's been sort of this grieving process of letting things go, that I'm not gonna be managing everything, being on top of everything, dealing with everything, or being even in the even showing up, and the credit will be sort of divided among everyone, and it just resonates a lot, because that's the only way you can do great things, right? By everyone kind of humbling themselves and playing their role.
Let me ask you one final question.
Sure.
What's the most interesting thing you think you've learned from the Exosphere experience so far?
I would definitely. I think it's what we're talking about. I really think it's learning to put myself, limit my ego and humble myself so we can accomplish a big mission. This is, I would argue that we're living sort of this time where it's all about you and the star, and be the Steve Jobs, be the Mark Zuckerberg, and we're forgetting everyone that's behind them, and it's just not accurate, and it's really fulfilling. I think so far I learned a lot from. I realized that I learned from everybody that's with me. I learned from my business partner Antonia, who's 50, and I learned from the younger crowd, and I learned from everybody, and we all play a role, and it's really fulfilling. And I guess this is pretty much what you've seen. Just by LinkedIn is such a monster that I'm sure you see how everybody brings a different piece of the puzzle to the table, right?
Yeah, well, it's being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Yeah. I mean, like, LinkedIn is bigger than any of us.
Right.
And, it's like, and I think there's something powerful about being involved in a mission, in an organization or a movement, that if you die or if you decide to quit, it will go on,
Right.
and so you can't have the kind of smug satisfaction that some entrepreneurs have, which is like, it all's on my shoulders, and if
Right.
I sleep an extra 2 hours, it means nothing gets done.
That is terrible.
It's really like, look, the train is moving.
Right.
Do you want to be on it and helping drive it in the right direction?
Right.
Or not, but it's bigger than you,
Yeah.
and you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that is a kind of satisfaction that a lot of the entrepreneurs who kind of are these solo entrepreneurs, these one-man shows, there's a lot of benefits to that. I think you're actually optimizing on happiness and meaning kind of at the same time in an interesting way, but you don't get that sense of mission greater than self when your business is, hi, I'm a one-man business and I coach and I blog and so on.
Right. Absolutely. It's like Ozymandias, the king. You think you're doing all these incredible things, but at some point you die and you're forgotten unless you're part of something that transcends your personal life, right?
Yeah.
So, well, Ben, I mean, this is very fun. This is fantastic, and I am very thankful that you got on board to doing this.
Thank you, Carlos. Always a pleasure, and as always, I learn from you as much as ever. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing this online.
Absolutely. More.